Welcome to the live stream. So, it's pretty early in the morning here, probably close to like 1 or 2 o'clock, and just up early. Went to bed a little bit earlier than I had anticipated yesterday, and what I'd intention on doing is actually going live and doing a live stream for Sri Rasikananda's Disappearance Day. So I figured, even though it's after the fact, by a day and stuff, I still wanted to honor Sri Rasikananda, and I wanted to share a little bit about him with all of you guys. We can draw a lot from him as a devotee, and I think the thing that really kind of sets him apart um, is his level of devotion. He was a person that came from means. He grew up in a family that was fairly well to do, fairly wealthy, but even with wealth and you know access to things that many people wouldn't have access to, Sri Rasikananda actually kind of, he did, in fact, just kind of say, no, this isn't a life that I want. Uh, I want to live an austere life, a life that is, dedicated to preaching and sharing God with others. And that was really the thing that really sets him apart from a lot of us. A lot of people that may have grown up with means, or people that have money, or people that come on to having really good jobs, and that pay high dollar. um, but the vast majority of people, globally, um, have a lot less than the majority. Well, the few people that have, or like, by comparison, anyway. I'm totally messing my words up here, you guys, but I hope you get the message or the point anyway. The top 1 or 2% of people that have like all this wealth, and then there's everybody else. That's just, some people just barely getting by, some people not getting by. And Sri Rasikananda, he happened to be in that minority of people that grew up with means. He could, have what he wanted, get what he needed, that type of thing. Hi. So with Rasikananda, he was one of these kind of people that was able to really showcase that. And he would go from village to village. It's not that he just stayed in one location, but he would travel village to village, and he would actually, hey guys, thanks for coming on the live stream here at the Bhakti House. So Rasikananda was, he became, a great Vaishnava saint, and he shared God with so many people, and that was kind of the thing that really set him apart. So devotion, a lot of times, has a lot to. There's some correlations of things. Um, I remember back in college days, doing a master's. I had one class, and it was business statistics, and it was a really challenging class for a lot of people. I did okay through the class, but I had to work really hard to be able to do really good through it. But one of the things I remember with the statistics is, there's correlations. When you're, doing these huge samples, and then you see certain patterns that start to emerge or start to arise, you can draw certain conclusions about certain things, right? And I promise I'm not going to make this a math class, this live stream. But the thing about it is, when there is, when you see devotion, like spiritual devotion, and then you see, I'm trying to think of a particular word here, and it's not coming to my mind. It's austerity. So when you do certain austerities, these are activities that promote devotional service, helping other people, whether it's reading, sacred texts, or doing like a fast, for example. I know, like, in our tradition, in our lineage, we do Ekadashi fast, or we call it a vrat, which is a vow. And essentially what that is like it's the 11th Tirti in the lunar calendar. It's basically 11 days. Like when you have a full moon, the day after count 11 days, and that would be the 11th day, right? And that would be Ekadashi. So the word Ekadashi actually means, in English, it would mean like the 11th day. And so every 11th day from the full moon, 11 days forward, or the new moon, 11 days forward, we take a fast from like grains and legumes and things like that. So no rice, no corn, no beans, nothing on that end. So it's just basically fruit and roots. And you can see examples of other people in the Srimad Bhagavatam. You can read different stories in there about people that have actually fasted just on like fruits, roots, flowers, leaves, these kind of things. And they would lose a lot of weight, so they would like slim down and that type of thing. And so as they're doing these austere things, these austerities, hey guys, as they're doing these austerities, they start to see that there is this correlation that happens. You're slimming down and you're reducing your body weight, and so there's correlations in that. So like in terms of like spiritual development and things, Prabhupada often says different things like, and sometimes it may be, especially like in today's day and age where we take things very literal. Back in those days, you have to kind of remember things were different. We didn't have cell phones. There's a lot of things that just weren't readily available to the vast majority of people. And I even remember being in school, like in my early years. This is kind of dating me, you guys. We didn't say like he or she, it, they, them, that type of thing as much as what we do. So like when you wrote something, it was always to the male side of things. It was always like for example, if you were to read the Bhagavad Gita as it is, chapter 6, verse 6 is, for one who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. But for one who has failed to do so, his mind will be the greatest enemy. But that would have been written actually for him who has conquered the mind is the best of friends. For him who has failed to do so, his mind would be the greatest enemy. And that's the way it would have been written. But it would have been for everyone. It wouldn't have just been for men. It would have been for literally everyone. So, but that was just the vernacular. That's the way that people communicated. And so, as we move forward progressively and different things, we come up with different ways of communicating. But when you go back into time and you look at things, you have to kind of understand that that was the context of the way that things were back then. And so, history is kind of interesting. Like when you go back and study history, things that you read about today may seem like just like, wow, I can't believe people actually did that, or, that they, because things have changed so much, So you can kind of see things on that end. So I guess today, really early this morning, I just wanted to kind of bring up about Sri Rasikananda. It's his disappearance day. And, in our tradition, in our lineage, spiritual lineage, we tend to not look at things in, like, disappearance day would be like someone's death or something, right? It's like they actually left this planet alive. So, but we actually observe it as more like celebratory, or, kind of honoring that person and kind of like what they stood for and that type of thing. So a big part of, and that actually can help you with your own spiritual development in so many ways. You can draw inspiration. You can learn from this person. You can kind of get an insight into like how they live their life. And you got to think with Sri Rasikananda, like he was so devoted, like, give up everything, that type of mentality. And then literally go from village to village and all, sharing God with other people and stuff. Not in kind of your I guess, he did it in a very kind and humble way. It wasn't like going and proselytizing to people saying, hey, if you don't believe this way, this, and if you don't do this, this is going to happen to you, and these kind of things. It wasn't done like that at all. It was very serious preaching, but it was more done in a very humble, heart-centric kind of manner. And in the process of doing that, you got to understand, like for many of us, the idea of going and talking to a stranger maybe kind of like scary or daunting or uncomfortable. But back in those days, you didn't have the internet. Communication was kind of more forward facing. And so we looked at things more from this idea of, just being um, friendly, and communicative and talking to people and sharing information and, you know, to get gossip or to get like the word on the street or to get news basically, you had to like carry that forward one person to the next person to the next person to the next person. So um, Rasikananda was one of those people. He could go and communicate pretty openly with people and very humbly and just share, um, the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, for example, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And he could explain what that is and help people like with their chanting and kind of give them some inspiration spiritually, share some spiritual text with them, read with them, these kind of things. So you might read Bhagavad Gita, you might read like Srimad Bhagavatam or these kind of sacred Vedic texts, that carried a lot of weight. And it wasn't just necessarily all spiritual, a lot of it was very practical things as well, like you know types of foods to eat, like what's good for your diet, what's good for your health. We get a lot of things like Ayurveda and um, just so many different things to stay away from, things that you might want to eat more of, these kind of things. And if you have a problem, this might be a good way of reducing some of those symptoms. So they had a lot of this information out there back then, and Rasikananda was one of these kind of individuals. He probably pretty good at communicating, I would imagine, and sharing information pretty openly with people and stuff. And I think that's kind of the takeaway. Nowadays we have social media, we got YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, you name it. And so the way that people communicate has gotten a lot different, in terms of things. And one of the things that I've noticed, just in, I don't know, maybe the last 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years is this idea of just less communication, very synthesized, just give me what I need and let me move on with things. People have become really, really impatient when it comes to the information that they receive. A couple of minutes in and you're out. And I know this firsthand. I've done a lot of content writing for websites, and just like writing for newspaper or something, what's above the fold, the headlines, is what people read, and then they may never actually read the article. So, but back in those days, people had a lot of time on their hands. They weren't as busy, in the sense that they are today. Where you gotta hurry off to work. You got to put your 8 to 12 hours in, however 16 for some of us. You got to do all of that. You got to come home. You got to make sure that the kids are fed, that you're fed, that everything's done, and then the next thing you know, you're off to bed and you're wash and repeat and do it all over again. So back in those days, things were, middle of the day, you could go and take a nap. You could do a little bit of work nicely, communicate with people, share some information, be hospitable. It wasn't just about making money. It was also about living life. And so that's the difference in mentality for a lot of us today. Our lives are kind of mechanical in so many ways, whereas back then it's not that they weren't necessarily mechanical, but there was other things involved with it as well. Like you go and you're hungry or something like that, you're talking to the shopkeeper, the owner, these kind of things. These were expected things. It wasn't just give me this and this, here's a credit card, let's go, let's get out of here. It wasn't so transactional. Yeah. So people had a way of just being that was a little bit maybe more wholesome in so many ways. And now even like with social media, right? It used to be that you'd have YouTube videos and different things, and now people are watching a lot of the shorts. I did some shorts last year for the Bhakti House, and it was just kind of experimental in so many ways, especially like getting the channel up and going. One of the things with YouTube is that you had to do so many shorts in order to be able to do lives, to make your channel go live, so you could kind of talk off the cuff, kind of like what I'm doing today, actually, right now. And so for that reason, I did some of these shorts where we did some of the Bhagavad Gita shlokas and did that, and then that was pretty much it. 15 seconds was enough, you know. And surprisingly, you know, what really shocked me is so many people actually were more engaged with that than some of the long form content that I was putting out, you know, just in terms of the Bhakti house and different things. Um, you know, it's so weird because like different people have different interests in things, you know, like and so if you start watching those shorts, I remember one time someone was, or I guess this is about the time that maybe YouTube was beginning to put the shorts together and stuff. To be perfectly honest with you, I've never really delved into TikTok. Um, Most of the things that I've done have been through YouTube, and YouTube's been around for like eons by now, it seems like. So, you know, I kind of grew up with it, and you know, it's just kind of the format that I'm most comfortable with, I guess. Not that I'm not willing to change, but when I started looking at the YouTube Shorts and I was watching these things, I remember the first time I did that, I just started watching, and then the next thing I knew is, um, you know, all of this information. Yeah, so many hours had gone by, like maybe 5 hours had gone by. I'd been watching these shorts, just you know, they keep flip flopping over and over and over. And the next thing I knew is like 5 hours of my day had gone by, and I was like, my goodness, I've got like so much stuff I need to get done. You know, so it became a little addictive, I guess, maybe, if that's the word for it, or just one of those things where you're just like, oh no, this is, you know, it's interesting. You know, it's like you learn things really fast in a quick short, and maybe it's more memorable or more easy to remember that way. I don't know. Everybody's got a different opinion. And if you have an opinion, please leave it in the comments below. Um, a lot of these comments, I guess now are, I'm looking on the YouTube now, it's saying that they're being held for review and different things. So I'll probably go back in at some point and then, you know, let these go through the whatever it is that they go through. Okay, I see some comments like, hi, hi everyone saying hi. Um, but I guess what I'm trying to say is like, you know, even with like the content, like writing for the web nowadays, you know, it's like short paragraphs, 1 or 2 sentences, some bullet points, you know, just things that are scannable. Not You're not taking a book, like a big book, and sitting down, you know, in a comfortable chair or something like that and reading it for hours. You know, that's not the kind of thing that, I mean, maybe that is something that some of us do. You know, I particularly do personally, but not everybody necessarily does this. You know, people want to get their content, their information pretty quick and then move on. So to be able to do that, you have to be able to draw conclusions pretty fast. So whatever information you're being given or presented with, you're you're making a quick instant decision about, do I trust this? Do I not trust this? Is this valid to my particular situation? Is this something useful, something that I'll use? And I know on a lot of the YouTube shorts, and I'm imagining probably TikTok as well, learning how to do something really fast is appealing to me. I know I've seen some of these different videos on YouTube about knot tying, you know, all these different fancy knots that people use. And I know I was looking at one time, and it was showing how you can take like these bamboo rods and make like a rope ladder out of it, like really fast using this certain knot. And I thought to myself, well, that's pretty useful, you know, especially if you have like a 2-story house or something, and you know, you've got bedrooms up on the second floor, you could use that rope ladder to like get out in case of an emergency or something. So I'm thinking like these kind of things, you know, just kind of in my brain about like, you know, and it showed it like in, you know, so I learned how to tie those knots in like 2.2 seconds. Now, do I remember it right this second? No, not really. Could I figure it out? Maybe, but I could probably go and find it really quick on YouTube and then watch it, you know, in 15 seconds or 30 seconds or however long the little clip was, and then be able to reproduce it and replicate it. And I find that really interesting actually as a concept because, you know, as kind of an educator, like a Bhakti educator, I'm one of these individuals. I like to get, like, if I want to learn something, I'd rather learn it faster. I get it better that way. Whereas like, I remember in the college days, you know, you'd sit in a classroom for, you know, 45 minutes to an hour and a half or however long the class happened to be. And, you know, it's just, oh, you know, by the time you got done with that class, your brain was like mush, and you're just like, what did they talk about again? You know, you had to take studious notes because you couldn't rely on just learning it in the class because it was just so long and so much information and so much to cover and so much blah, 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 that it was just like, oh, I can't really get this. But I found later on that if I could take the basic core concepts and just put it in a really quick, this is the big picture, this is what they're wanting, these are the fine points, then I was a lot better at, being able to do things more effectively in that. So, yeah, so there it is. Um, and so I guess maybe it's a good time to actually turn back to Rasikananda now and just talk about him a little bit more in terms of like, you know, he was one of those individuals, like I said, he would go from village to village and, and the act of doing this, I guess that's kind of one of the points I really want to make in this video with him is it was a very austere act of his, like his austerity is something that actually helped his devotion. And the more that he did it, so the easier it became for him to connect with people and to meet perfect strangers and to go from one location to another location. And, you got to understand is, and if you live here in the United States or if you live somewhere else, it's probably applicable to many different areas where you have certain groups of people that have different ways of thinking or different ways of communicating, different cultural dynamics, things that define them as a people. And, like if an outsider comes into that town or something like that, it's pretty obvious that that person's not from that area, right? So you get some of that. And then on the other hand, you have people that have grown up in one location their entire life. They know like so many people in that vicinity, that locality. And now they're able to just communicate with people because they know them. It's very comfortable for them. But if they were to leave that area and, all their privilege and everything that they have there and go someplace else, it would be like starting new. And that starting new can be very scary for a lot of people. Like change is not always the easiest thing for human beings. But some people can handle it a lot easier than other people. So Rasikananda, I can only imagine like in the beginning of like his kind of getting out there and preaching and sharing God with other people and spiritual development and this idea of bhakti and everything. I can only imagine that, in the beginning it was probably a little bit trying, it was probably a little bit like a little scary or, a little bit uncomfortable. But then as he probably continued to communicate more and more, it probably became a little bit easier and more comfortable for him. And then eventually it probably got to a point where it was just like breathing, you just do it automatically. And so I guess that's the encouragement for things is sometimes, we get outside our comfort zone a little bit and it may seem a little bit scary or uncomfortable at first, but then as we continue on with something, it becomes a little bit easier for us until eventually it's almost we become expert at it to the point where we almost take it for granted even. And so we can take spiritual life and what we've learned for granted in a sense as well. I mean, depending on where you're from and what culture you come from and what religious or spiritual, background that you come from, you may know a lot more than you think I mean, you may have studied things just inadvertently or through other people or through classes or, just through the dynamics of growing up in that particular area or vicinity or culture that you just literally take for granted. You just don't even know why you know the things that you know. And to learn new things can be very interesting though. And so, just kind of stepping outside your comfort zone and say, oh, this is interesting. I think I'll try this or study this or, and it may be something that you somewhat identify with. And if that's the case, then I guess that's pretty cool. I know for myself personally, I have a tendency like when I'm doing research on something, like yesterday I was really like trying to get this information about Rasikananda, and so we put a blog post up on the bhaktihouse.org website. You can just go to the website if you want. I'll have a link in the description below this video at some point, but it's thebhaktihouse.org, thebhaktihouse.org. And if you go to the website, click on blog, you'll actually see a picture of Rasikananda, an image on there, the header image, and then I've got the content and everything for you guys. And I've also put together some relative verses, related verses, and things that you might be interested in as well. You can check those out if you get time or if it just interests you. Rasikananda is really fascinating personality in the sense that, he is someone that participated in these austerities, doing things that were austere, whether it's presenting himself as humble or connecting with people on kind of a spiritual level and sharing information with others and stuff like that in just a really nice way. Not sectarian or like overly zealous or anything like that, but just in a really nice way of sharing just general information that people might find interesting. The passing on of things. It's like passing history forward. And we see this like even in the Vedas. Like if you look at like Ramayana, or if you look at the Mahabharata. Mahabharata is the longest epic poem ever written. And but if you look at Mahabharata, Maha means great, Bharat means India. So it's like basically the great history of India. And this is like Vedic times. And so you can see all these really cool things. In fact, our Bhagavad Gita, even our Bhagavad Gita and stuff like that, this book here is just 18 chapters from the greater Mahabharata. So some people may not even know that. And like I say, it's the information we get that we pull in that we may not even know that we know. But when you're looking at things like in terms of information and, gathering things, like just facts or history and stuff like that, you see like changes, and that can be very interesting. I was talking to a historian, I believe it was yesterday, who was explaining to me and things about like U.S. history and about World War I and about B-52 bombers, I believe it was, that he was talking about, and how they actually did a lot for some kind of war or something on this end, World War I. And I don't know, it was kind of interesting to hear how he shared the information and about how people thought, or what the things were, what the world was like in that particular time. So I think you have to look at things kind of within context. And I guess the same is true like with Rasikananda. He was just kind of a village jumper. He wasn't in one place for too long, kind of like a sadhu. These are the people that they give a talk or something like that, a spiritual talk, and then they move on. They're not here to develop really in-depth relationships with people. It's more about just sharing the information that's in their heart, the love that's in their heart with others, and then being able to move on and continue sharing that same message again and again and again and again. So as you might imagine, if you've got one single message and you're sharing it over and over again, maybe a little bit differently, and of course you'll probably tweak things and make them a little bit more acceptable, in terms of how you present the information, and where people can get them better. So you refine your approaches, and that might be something. So maybe that's kind of the message here for what we see with Sri Rasikananda. Maybe it's to say, okay, look, we can be humble enough that we're not perfect on anything, right? And so, the act of doing things, I teach harmonium lessons, and I teach people how to play by ear. And so, put together a nice course on that and stuff like that. But, when it comes to like teaching people, like when they first start learning, I notice a lot of the students, when they first start learning how to play harmonium, if they learn to play one song, it's like, oh, wow, it's like so eye-opening. And then it's like, wow, this is really neat. Then as they continue learning and stuff, and they learn a little bit about music theory and about how, how to, like how the ear hears different tones and so on and so forth, eventually the light bulb goes off in their head, and they get it. And once they get it, it's like the magician with the magic tricks, right? When you're the spectator watching the magician, it looks like, oh, wow, that's like so amazing. But then when the magician teaches you the magic trick and you learn it and you really get it and you grasp it, you're like, wow, that was so easy. That was so easy, wow, and then it's almost like you're embarrassed to even replicate the magic trick because of how simple it is. you're thinking to yourself, oh, people will find me out, because, it's really not that difficult. And I guess the same thing can be applied, uh, you can go to, like, I remember years and years ago, I was at this meditation center. In fact, I think the name of it was called the Meditation Center or the Meditation House or something like that. But it was, um, I want to say Northwest University Avenue or something, but it was in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And there was an Indian saint that was coming and stuff. They're going to have a big kirtan and meditation. People from different Hindu and Buddhist and different groups and stuff all came. Spiritualists, you name it, even Christians. I mean, everybody was there. I mean, it was huge. But this house that they had there, I remember it was like, I believe it was like 2 stories, and they had like a little library in there and stuff, and like a little bookstore where you could purchase books. And they had tables sprawled out where the saints' books and stuff that they had written and put together, the organization had put together the month. You could purchase those books to kind of support that and everything. I believe I did. But when I'm sitting there in the kirtan, and they did the music and everything, it was really lovely, really great, very spiritually stimulating, I would say. And the connection that I had with everyone in there was just really good. But I remember in those days, and this has really been like, I don't know, probably like 30 years ago or something like that. So, I mean, that just goes to put this into perspective for you. That it's been a little while. I hope the place is still there because it was really a lovely place. But I remember saying something, and when I did, everybody was like, they kind of, oh, no, 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 don't do that, And I was just like kind of taken aback because I mean, ignorance is like ignorance. I didn't really know, but I'd said something. You had a lot of people like ahimsa, like nonviolence and you know. Uh, let's make love, not war kind of people, and hippies and different things. But people that were really geared on this whole idea of like, we're not creating violence or anything, like vegetarian community, vegan community, that kind of thing. So you had all these here factions of people, and I just happened to be there, and I said something like, oh, that's like killing two birds with one stone, kind of like the metaphor, killing two birds with one stone. Well, some of the people, internationals that had come, they'd never even heard that before. And I said it around, I don't know if it was a group of German spiritualists or what it was. I can't remember. Maybe from like maybe Amsterdam or someplace. I can't really recall. But they're like, no, 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 we don't kill nothing, no birds. You shouldn't kill birds and stuff, And then they kind of like lectured me on that for, a good minute or two. And, I had to eat a little humble pie and then really think, okay, I have to watch what I say, because sometimes people are going to take what I say maybe out of context, or they're going to take it very literal. And that's exactly what happened. And so I had to kind of explain, no, I'm sorry, that's just a figure of speech. It's like a saying. There's like, oh, don't ever say that saying. And it dawned on me that, yeah, maybe that's not a really good saying, like when I stopped to really consider it. And so it looks like, so when I was kind of getting on with, anyways, my point is that it was a lovely program and stuff like that, but it was also a moment where I learned something just in terms about like communication, and when you're in your own area and stuff like that, everyone would have probably have heard that saying and just, it would just, flew under the radar, so to speak. Another saying, by the way, which just means that they didn't really get it or grasp, they would have just said, oh, they would have known what I meant. But for people that were not from that vicinity or from the community, they didn't really understand what I was trying to relay or what I was trying to communicate. And so in that way, it became offensive to them. So just like, in doing my MBA in marketing, one of the things I remember from one of the classes was when marketers for these major companies like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, these kind of companies that are doing international trade, and they're actually promoting and marketing their products in different countries, the marketing messages can very much differ from the messages that are being relayed like in America or in other countries, just because the words or the way that we say things may be interpreted much differently, even more offensively, like in other countries. And there's been many instances where they had to pull ad campaigns, or, people were like very upset, because of what a marketing message that had been put out, So you have to be very careful with the way that we approach and present information. And Rasikananda, he was the kind of person, he probably learned early on that in certain areas that he would travel to and visit, he would maybe have to adapt his message a little bit differently than in other areas. But by and large, after you've created a message and you've put together a talk, I guess is a good way of putting it, at that point, you probably have said the same thing over and over again to where it becomes pretty rudimentary, pretty easy to just kind of spit out of your mouth, and just kind of like, have success with. And you know how people are going to respond because you've seen the responses time and time again to where it becomes a little bit easier and a little bit easier. So I guess what we can learn from Rasikananda, just kind of in conclusion of this video, is just that, how we communicate and stuff like that may change based on the times, like just in terms of like human history, like where we're at with things. I mentioned earlier on about like today people are getting information in really small doses, like with TikTok and the YouTube shorts and these kind of things. Also, sometimes there is a place for like long form content on a rainy day and stuff like that, thunderstorm, lightning striking out of the sky and different things. Maybe you're trapped indoors and you really can't go outside. Maybe there is no power on and you have, a really good book to read or something like that. You might sit down and just, spend your time, and let some hours pass just going through and reading a text. In those kind of cases and stuff, that might be more appropriate. But if you have internet, you're connected, chances are everyone's got a phone in their hands nowadays. You almost have to have a phone for like two-factor authentication. I won't even get started down that path on this video and stuff, goodness help you if you forget your phone someplace and you go out into the world and you need it for something, I've had that happen several times. I don't know if you guys have or not. If you have, maybe share some of those situations or something in the comments if you like. But if you, but like I said, if you'd like to know more about Rasikananda, check out the blog on the bhaktihouse.org website. Also, just understand that if you're trying to do something or you're trying to like share something with someone, and that the sharing itself can be an act or a vow of like austerity in so many ways. And austerity, like I was talking about with the Prabhupada mention earlier, when you're doing things that are austere, you're doing things that are like to help your spiritual development, there are side effects maybe that happen as a result. And so, for example, like losing weight and different things. There's different mentions in some of Prabhupada's purports, and like Devaduti, she was a very austere person, very devout. You can read about her in Srimad Bhagavatam. If you guys don't have a Srimad Bhagavatam set and you'd like one, just let me know and I can get you information on that as well. I would definitely recommend reading it in this lifetime if you haven't already. And if you just like the Bhagavad Gita, for example, let me know on that too. I can get you information on that too and stuff. That, she was so devout, and, she came from, like Rasikananda, she came from means as well. Her father was a king. Her husband actually was not so much a king, but he was very wealthy. And, like I said, they had money and abundance and all these kind of things. And, she grew up with all of that. But even so, she was very austere. And so she did all these austerities and everything. And she served her husband. And, she was a very humble, devotee and personality, that she did so much of that, even after her husband passed, she did all these austerities, for him and whatnot, to the point of like a lot of saints back in the day, it was like customary that people would bathe 3 times a day. So in the morning, of course, and then around noontime, and then in the evening time as well. And this was like a lot of what the sadhus, well, she was following this, eating like just basic simple foods and stuff like that, so that it wouldn't like kind of take away from her spiritual development or kind of pollute her thinking and her mindset and everything. She would just want to give 100% complete focus on God. And in the sense of doing that, the Srimad Bhagavatam explains how she actually lost a lot of weight. She actually slimmed down and became very skinny. Her hair got gray and stuff from bathing so much and from all of her penance and austerities and all these kind of things. And but in the case of doing that, her spiritual development, increased, I guess, if you want to look at it in terms of measurement, but it became like the core of her personality. I mean, it became who she was. And we can think in terms of Rasikananda kind of in the same way, material pursuits, chasing the almighty dollar or rupee or whatever. It wasn't really, in the cards for him. And he said, no, my life is short as it is. What am I going to do with the life that I have to be able to use it the most effectively, in order to promote, Krishna consciousness or God consciousness to other people, and to share people this message that when you look at things in totality, what are the things that really matter the most to us? What is the most important things on our checkoff list? Like if you had to make a list of all the things that were in order of importance, like what's most important in your life? I mean, if for me personally, I'd probably put like God is number one, family number two, community number three, work number four, something along those lines, and just kind of go down the list with the different things. But you'd be surprised. Some people may put work as number one. Work is the most important thing. And in some cultures, that may be the most valuable thing, the most prized thing, or the thing that people are taught is the most important thing, is that we do our work. I was at a Sikh temple one time, and I remember I arrived a little bit early, and one of the Sikhs there, he actually invited me downstairs into the basement kitchen and shared that, they had pakoras, and they had, I'm trying to think what else they had. They had pakoras and sabudana khichdi. I mean, they had some really nice, amazing preparations that had been offered and prepared and stuff. And so, of course, I'm sitting down and getting a plate and stuff, and I have a plate, and I'm asking him about the things, does this have onion or garlic, and all these kind of things that I would probably ask about, and he's like, no, this is just kind of sattvic and blah blah blah, and he's explaining to me about the Sikh religion and really sharing things with me, and he's kind of maybe like how Rasikananda might have been back in the day. But I remember, like, in this within this experience with him, he he said, okay, now when you're done with this plate, what you do is you take this plate and your spoon and your cup, and then you put them in the trash. And these were like, I don't think they were really cardboard. They were made out of like sugar cane or something, these dishes. And he explained to me that they're biodegradable, good for the environment, and this and that. He said, you put them in the trash, they recycle them and everything. And then what you do is you go to the sink, you wash your hands, cleanliness is godliness. And then after that, then you can then go and get another plate and help yourself to more pakoras, more sabudana khichdi, and so on. And I was like, oh, okay, sure. I said, but is it wasteful to just, he's like, no, we do this for cleanliness and to also protect the integrity of this place, and for the other devotees as well that want to come and take langar is what they call it, like in Punjabi, but langar means kitchen in Punjabi, but it's also the vernacular that they use at the Sikh temples for like taking the food. And the whole idea that this devotee was explaining to me is within the Sikh religion is that kings or beggars should all sit together and all should have this. There's no difference. You shouldn't think of one as being, oh, this person is more elevated than this person, And so when we look at like Rasikananda, or we look at Devaduti, for example, both of them came from what society would probably say is, oh, this is a very exalted personality. These are people that we have to respect. They were not the I don't want to say low lives or like the homeless or the people on the bottom rung of society. They were like more elevated individuals. So they came with that first and foremost, but they just renounced that and said, no, we're no different than anybody else. We love everybody. We're going to live our life very humbly and simply. And that's exactly what we get from kind of their examples. And that's what the Sikh gentleman was explaining to me about I believe it was Guru Nanak had actually said, no, this is oppressive. This is what we're gonna. This is the way we're gonna do this, and everyone can eat together and stuff. And this is kind of how this all came about. And so it was really a fascinating experience. But then I went and once I knew what the system was or the process was through his teaching me, I was then able to go and get more prasadam and stuff like that, and uh, coexist more easily within that environment, within that community. And I didn't feel like such an outsider after the fact. Now that I kind of knew what the program was, I could easily go back there and feel very comfortable. And but going for the first time and by myself at that, it was just something I chose to do one day. It was completely outside my comfort zone, and I was nervous. I'd never been to a Sikh temple. I remember I had never tied a turban before, and I remember I was asking someone before I actually decided to go, how do you tie a turban? And they showed me just a really simple way of tying a turban, and I learned it in like 5 minutes. And I had, and then the day of going, I remember this. I actually got one of my chadars, wrapped it up, and I tied the turban really fast, and I went to the Sikh temple, and it was quite an experience, and I felt like, because I had done a little bit of preemptive exploratory research, if you will, on going and kind of what the religion was and this, that, and the other, I felt more prepared and stuff to go. And you might ask yourself, okay, coming from a Hare Krishna background, why didn't you just go to like a Hare Krishna temple? And the answer to that is because where I was at the time, there were no Hare Krishna temples. And the Sikh temple was really the closest thing to maybe that. And so it was just something that I thought, well, this would be interesting. I've never been to one before, so why not check it out, We're very open, So, so that was kind of my first kind of experience. Then the interesting thing is I ended up going back upstairs to where the service was, and they do like kirtan and stuff. So it's a lot of the Sikh religion mirrors or emulates quite closely to like Hare Krishna religion as well, like in terms of our programs and how we do things. Like we do kirtans and different things. Well, they do kirtans. The only difference is that instead of doing kirtans based on the Maha Mantra, they're doing it from like maybe their holy book, the Guru Granth Sahib. So they're taking like verses of that and singing that kind of, or publicly as well. And they're using different Indian ragas when they sing those, and it was pretty fascinating. So like, especially from someone that enjoys learning more and more about like Indian music and like the different ragas and so on. This was kind of like a nice kind of experience for me in terms of learning that as well. I could kind of use my ear and kind of listen to kind of the hear the different ragas, Indian ragas, and it was pretty neat. But when I'm back upstairs and we're doing that, someone comes along and they hand me a sweet. It was some young boy, is another Sikh boy, came and offered a sweet. And he did that to everyone, not just me. I'm not special or anything, that's the whole point. But they would offer the sweet, and so I went to offer it like we would maybe offer like in India, like where you cup your hand kind of like this, and then they give you like a laddu or something. It's very similar to that. I believe this was like warm halava that they were offering and stuff, but he said, no, you cup both hands. So that was another learning thing for me. You cup the both hands, and then they give you the sweet, and then you can do your namaste and so on, and pay your respects that way. And then you can enjoy the prasadam. Then maybe about like just before it was ending, maybe 15-20 minutes before, they came and gave another sweet to everybody, and I'm just going with the flow, so I take that sweet and I enjoy that as well. And then after the program, and here's where things get interesting. I thought that the langar, the food that we had before the program started, I thought that was the way that this Sikh temple just did things. I didn't know that it was after the fact that they have another meal. So like I had 2 pretty good sized plates of food, probably more than I deserve, or should have even taken. But the food was really good, by the way. But I had that, and offered it, but ate it. And then when I finished the program, I'm getting ready to leave, and they're like, "No, no, no, where are you going?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know. Did you need help?" I was going to offer some service, and say, "No, no, no, no. There's the lumgar downstairs." I said, "The food?" And he's like, "Yeah, yeah." I said, "Well, we had that earlier." And so, no, and they said, "No, no, no. This is new. This is like fresh. You'll like. Come, come, come." I was like, "Okay." So then I went downstairs and stuff, and we're all sitting Indian style on the rug, and then they came by and they started serving us just like what we would do like at the Bhakti house. And it was just really an incredible experience, because I was thinking to myself, wow, and so many different preparations that they had and everything, that it was just really memorable for me. It was just a really good experience going and experiencing that. Now, the beliefs and different things are completely different from us, in terms of our lineage and that, but that's okay, You can still take what you learn away from that, to help you and to share like hospitality and community with others. So we see a lot of things just by learning things from other things. We can take appreciation from different things. We don't have to be so linear, so one-sided and say, "Oh, my way's the only way." We can look at things and kind of with an open mind and an open heart, and by being humble and learning and being willing to take and share at the same time, we can take all of that and use it to even help our own spiritual development, and to live a more spiritual life, and to find more peace in our life, and then also get some answers to some of the philosophical questions that human beings tend to ask themselves. What's the meaning of life? What are all these things? And by doing these kind of things, we can draw a lot. Boy, I'll tell you what, guys, I had planned on this being kind of a short video, and I didn't realize I'd be doing this as long as I have been. This is running in about 51 minutes. So, I mean, it's a little bit getting long, I guess, to be doing a video maybe on YouTube. I don't know if you guys will have lasted this long or not. Maybe some of you are resting, actually. But anyway, I want to just say I appreciate you guys' time. And I hope that by observing Rasikananda's Disappearance Day, that just collectively or shared with me or just through this video, whether you watched this video on his Disappearance Day or saw the blog post on his Disappearance Day or not, maybe you're watching this 6 months, 7, 8 months down the line, or maybe years later, it doesn't really matter. It's the message that we're trying to get. So it's kind of like his preaching or his devotional service is being carried forward through like other people because of what he had done so many years ago. Just like the message of Jesus, being broadcast so many years down the line to humanity and stuff like that. All of the things like on Sermon on the Mount, and all of the parables and different things that Jesus had. These are things that were shared as well. So we get the spiritual benefit of those that came before us, and by sharing what we've learned with other people, kind of by mirroring, and reciprocating the knowledge that we gain to other people as well, but in a humble way, not in an egotistical way of like, oh, look at me, look at how much I know, or look at this, and I know I can recite every Bhagavad Gita verse and this and that and blah blah blah. It's not about that at all. It's really just about really humbly sharing and having some nice conversation, and being able to be wholesome and helpful to people, and doing it in service to God and in service to humanity as well. So let's all turn on our loving hearts and just love one another, and try to do some nice while we're on this planet for as long as we've got. And yeah, love you guys, and much love, many blessings, and we'll see you guys on the next episode of the Bhakti House. Thanks for tuning in. Haribol.